Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
Ezra Levant here in Toronto, Canada. I am joined in Calgary by Adam Soos and in Northern Alberta by our friend Sheila, Gunn, Reid. We have an emergency broadcast. We have in hand the ruling of Justice Adam GERMAIN at the Court of Queen's Bench of Alberta. He was the judge that imposed the most bizarre, unethical, unprofessional, unconstitutional court sentence I think I have ever read in all my decades of following news about courts. And of course, I practiced for a while as a lawyer myself. I have never seen anything like this. We know from the live stream of the sentencing hearing that Adam covered from outside of the court and that Sheila live tweeted. I was not listening to the comments of the judge, but I read them through Sheila's tweets. That the judge was out of control. That the judge was abusive, insulting, unprofessional. He was a mind reader getting into the head of Pastor Artur PAWLOWSKI. We knew all that. And we knew the result. That this judge ordered Pastor Artur PAWLOWSKI that whenever he says something that contradicts the government's point of view, whether it's in a sermon or a Facebook post or a media interview, he must immediately renounce himself, denounce himself, rebut himself, argue against himself. He must be compelled to speak words he disagrees with. This is a North Korea-style ruling, and we have it in hand. It was filed today. I thought that the judge might have tried to tweak it so he sounded less insane. He did not. This ruling is clearly unconstitutional. It's un-Canadian. In addition to the compelled speech, there's massive fines for Arthur and his brother and Chris Scott. And finally, again, just to show how punitive it is, the judge specifically rails against Artur PAWLOWSKI's church speaking tour and makes sure that will never happen again by banning Pastor Artur from leaving the province of Alberta, a stunning condition that is more akin to what you would do to a sexual predator. For example, banning him from going certain places. This is the worst court ruling I have ever read in a democratic, liberal country like Canada, where the rule of law holds. I've never seen anything like this in Canada. You can read the entire ruling for yourself at firethejudge.com, and as that website suggests, that's what must happen. The Canadian Judicial Council, the authority that reviews unethical misconduct by judges and that occasionally suspends or even fires judges, they absolutely must weigh in. They must suspend Justice Adam GERMAIN. They must investigate him. And I mean, the proof of it's in black and white. He is clearly incapable of living up to the public trust granted to him. He's an abomination, and to use the language of our Constitution, he brings the administration of justice into disrepute. Go to firethejudge.com, add your name to the petition. This is not only wrong in itself, but this judge has disqualified himself from sitting as a judge. This is the worst ruling I've ever seen. Sheila?
Well, I mean, this ruling, I'm scanning through it just as you're speaking. We just got this moments ago. That's why we're doing this emergency broadcast. But it starts off with hyperbole. When a judge has to write, as is in section B background, that something is not an overstatement, it generally is going to be an overstatement. When I was listening to this, I was trying to type and trying to write so that I could relay what I was hearing to a horrified public. And, you know, you always sort of worry that you get things accurate, that you're hearing things right. And I was in disbelief myself. But what I tweeted is what this judge wrote here. He says, "It is not an overstatement that Pastor Artur PAWLOWSKI and his brother David PAWLOWSKI have contributed to this ominous health situation by their defiance of the health rules and their public posturing, which encourages others to doubt the legitimacy of the pandemic and to disobeyed the AHS health orders designed to protect them. This judge has made Artur, his brother David, and by extension Chris Scott, who was also sentenced on the very same day to the same sort of struggle session provisions, this judge has made them responsible for the failings of the public health care system that refused to ramp up over 20 months. This is one of the most political decisions, if not the most political decision I've ever read from a judge ever.
And by the way, that's a wicked lie. There was no evidence adduced at court at all that could give the judge the basis to claim that this church was the source of an outbreak or even a single case.
Yes.
This judge did not have the evidence necessary to say these outrageous things, so he cooked it up himself. Imagine who else this judge has done it to. Who else has the judge done it to? Adam, you were standing outside the court with the PAWLOWSKI brothers and their supporters. Now that you see the crystallized, we're going to go through this ruling. That's what we're going to do in the course of the next hour. We're going to go through this ruling. But you've just had a chance, like Sheila and I, just to skim it in the last hour. Give me your thoughts, especially as someone who's been following this case so closely on the ground in Calgary.
The haunting thing for me with this is when I was hearing those words, I was standing directly beside Pastor Artur PAWLOWSKI. We were standing on the court steps, we had our earbuds in, and repeatedly we looked over at each other in a state of complete disbelief. This ruling, now seeing it in ink, truly solidifies the total politicization of these courts. Justice Adam Germain is saying the quiet parts out loud, and then he took 24 hours to further review this document, and what he came up with was just as radical as the original documents. It's extremely troubling. I don't doubt that a number of Liberal-appointed judges have these biases underneath, but I trust that most of them have the wherewithal to leave it at home and to, at least in the public face and what they present in court, provide some semblance that they're trying to uphold the charter. That has been thrown out the window. This has been categorically political. And I can tell you, while Sarah Miller did an exceptional job and ensured in her arguments that there was no justifiable grounds for Pastor Artur to be thrown in prison, Pastor Artur was more disappointed by this because his role, his fundamental role, he's been through so much, hundreds of court appearances, all of these tickets, so that he could be a pastor and that he could feed the people on the streets. And Justice Adam Germain did not deliver a judicial ruling. He delivered a political attack and a personal attack on Pastor Artur PAWLOWSKI's role as a pastor.
Yeah, this is just incredible. Adam, thank you for being there on the ground. I would like to start going through this 12-page ruling. And normally rulings have legalese. They have phrases that the layman might not understand. Technical phrases, references to case law, and even a little bit of Latin. Lots of court rulings are written in high-minded, even intellectual language. Not this one. This one has a veneer of legality to it, but it's actually written more like a personal diary, like a emo rant of some spurned high school kid who is just mad that it's so unprofessional. Go ahead, Adam.
I was just saying it's a Facebook post.
It's a Facebook post?
Yeah.
It's a man who is not in control of his emotions. It is a man who is derelict in his duties. And really, who cares if he was just some guy? But he's not some guy. He's a judge. Now, I don't think he belongs as a judge. He never did. He was a failed Liberal candidate that Jean Chrétien gave a consolation prize to and appointed to the bench. And he's really stayed out of trouble, kept his head down low. But I didn't know he was such a bigot. Enough preamble. Let's get to the ruling. Let me call to our producer, Andrew, to put on the screen. And we're going to go through this thing. We're going to go through it because it's 12 pages. But I want you to see this ruling, because I know that the media party will not give you the details, because they will know that this is deeply embarrassing. It reminds me of the news that Katie Couric interviewed the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the left-wing icon on the Supreme Court. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg condemned the kneeling in the NFL and Colin Kaepernick, and she condemned the far left. Katie Couric would not report that. She censored that because she knew that would cause a kerfuffle. So the media party, same thing here. They will not show you what the judge has actually said. So we're going to do that now. So please put it on the screen. You can see in the top right, it's stamped as filed today. Court of Queen's Bench. It says Judicial Center Edmonton, but it's actually, I think it's Calgary.
Calgary.
Alberta Health Services, Arthur Pawlowski and his brother David Pawlowski. Reasons for the sanction decision by the Honorable Mr. Justice Germain. Now, the first introduction just sets out what they're talking about. On May 6th, there was a court order. Paragraph 2, I found both Pastor Arthur and his brother breached the Rook order and are in contempt of court. I also found others in the breach of the court order, and you can see that there. Paragraph 3, during the sanction phase of these contempt procedures, Kevin Johnson concluded his case with a negotiated settlement. We'll skip over that. We're here to talk about Pastor Arthur. So he goes to paragraph 5. The World Health Organization declared COVID a pandemic. And then he says, ironically, Pastor Arthur and David are being sanctioned at a time when the threat to Albertans has never been greater. That's actually not true. That's a political opinion. It's a medical opinion, but it's not a legal truth. There's no evidence before the court to say that. I mean, that may be his opinion, but you can see right here what this is about. This is not law. This is politics.
Sorry to interrupt you, Ezra, but Section B, for those of you who are going to read this document later on, because we are going to publish it in full, Section B is Justice Adam Germain making his political and ideological, and I guess in some respects a religious argument for the cult of lockdownism. This is where he says, without a shadow of a doubt, he gives away his ideology. He's a lockdowner, and Pastor Art is an anti-lockdowner, and that's what this is about. Pastor Art challenges that.
Well, and here's the thing, and I'd like Andrew to zoom in on this. There's a paragraph in the middle, there's a sentence in the middle of this paragraph. It is not an overstatement that Pastor Arthur Pawlowski and his brother David Pawlowski have contributed to this ominous health situation by their defiance of the health rules and their public posturing, which encourages others to doubt the legitimacy of the pandemic and to disobey. So without any evidence, without any, like there has been no outbreak of the church, but he claims that he's scapegoating, he's blaming these unclean men for causing the pandemic. Next paragraph. Alberta asked the Canadian federal government for help as well as the Canadian military. Yeah, that's a PR gesture. There's 35,000 nurses in Alberta. I understand the military sent 7. That's a PR gesture so Trudeau can look down his nose at Alberta and so that Jason Kenney can excuse his vaccine passports. But this judge is too stupid to know it.
Well, and sent them from where? CFB Edmonton up the road. You know, they didn't scramble nurses from across the country.
The other thing here that's troubling and that Sarah Miller mentioned is just, and I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a judge, but just as far as the proceedings that take place within court, the amount of new material being presented here in this sanction phase where it's supposed to be a wrap-up, he's opening many cans of worms here and starting new conversations. And worse still, in his exegesis and in his response, he didn't actually reference, and I'm sure it'll come later, but he didn't reference the precedent cases that Sarah Miller laid out. So what should usually occur within a sanctions phase is not actually occurring. I just have to, and this may be a little petty though, but this use of the term ironically, that's not ironically. If anything, he means fittingly. So even within his delayed public ruling, he's using terms incorrectly that the common man would use correctly. So it's an incredibly bizarre document.
Yeah, let me read one more line here from paragraph 6. He says, today, virtually everybody in Alberta knows at least one person that has died from COVID-19. Now, I'm not laughing because, of course, if someone dies, that's not a laughing matter. But there's 4.5 million Albertans, and there have been about 3,000 deaths, of whom the average age is 80, and the average person had 3 or more underlying conditions. So I don't know if everyone knows at least one person, because just pure statistics, 1 in 1,500 people. So, and they're almost all in their 80s, and they're almost all terribly sick to begin with. And we know that the province of Alberta has an honesty problem. They claim that a kid who died of brain cancer died of COVID. So I think what we see here is that this 74-year-old judge, I think he's 74, who's living in terror, who himself probably knows someone. He's projecting his own insecurities, his scientific illiteracy, his fear and his rage onto Artur Pawlowski. I'm not thrilled that 3,000 Albertans have died from COVID. I don't know if I trust the figure, given the lies we're now seeing from the government. And I think we should shut down the YouTube broadcast here and ask everyone to move over to Rumble. Actually, you know what? We're fine. But you have to be careful because YouTube will ban you. But this judge is engaging in made-up facts. There's no evidence. It is not a fact that every Albertan knows at least one person. That's not a fact. And it certainly wasn't a fact before this judge. This is a Facebook post. Let's keep going. Let's skip ahead. So, paragraph 7. The position of Alberta Health Services is that Pastor Pawlowski and David Pawlowski knew they faced contempt. Pastor Pawlowski acted defiantly when he was served with the Gates order, refused an inspection of his church facility. Yeah, it was in the middle of a church service on the date of their arrest. They received a thorough briefing from co-contemner Kevin Johnson, and were aware that the police had taken an extraordinary step of publicly announcing their book order. Despite that, Pastor Pawlowski, aided by his mother, went ahead with the church service. Go ahead, Sheila.
Well, I was just going to say, so they consider an understanding of the order in front of them to be a briefing from a co-contemner, Kevin J. Johnston. That's what they think. So if some layman comes up and says, hey, this is what this order says, you may or may not have read it, and I may be getting it wrong, but that's what they consider a thorough briefing here. That's insane.
And it's insane, and I want to let you know that there is video of the police handing the order to
in a baggie.
Arthur, in a baggie. Arthur has it for about 1 minute before the police take action on it. The police know that Arthur has a lawyer. They didn't give it to the lawyer. They didn't brief the lawyer. He didn't have a lawyer explain it. And for this kooky judge to say, well, some other guy told you about it, that is not the I mean, this is going to be smashed down by a court of appeal, I'm certain of it, but that's not the front line today. The front line is this judge needs to be removed from the bench because, I mean, we knew he wasn't qualified to be a judge. He was a liberal patronage appointment. Fine. But look at this madness. Go ahead, Adam.
What they're referencing here in this thorough debriefing, so to speak, is a video clip from a live stream. And in that clip, to the best of my recollection, Pastor Artur Pawlowski is looking out the window and talking to people while someone comes up to him and starts telling him in very ambiguous terms that there's certain restrictions in place. To call this a thorough debriefing is absolutely ridiculous and a false characterization of what happened in the video clip that we all saw in court.
Paragraph 9 outlines Arthur's position, although I don't even think the judge read Arthur's legal brief. He certainly doesn't refer to the case law put by Arthur's outstanding lawyer, Sarah Miller. Let me read paragraph 9. The position of the contemner. Contemner is a fancy word that means someone who's found in contempt of court. The position of the contemner is that this is an inappropriate case for jail, as both are otherwise law-abiding citizens who've become a spokesman for policies in opposition to the severity of the Alberta Health Services order. They assert that as both of these contempt orders were obtained on an ex parte basis, that means their lawyers weren't told about it. It was a secret hearing. They were given no significant time to consider their conduct and therefore should be sanctioned more as spur-of-the-moment contemners rather than having acted in planned and deliberate manner. They assert that a small fine is appropriate, or even no further sanction. They also assert that costs are not appropriate, as Alberta Health Services utilize staff lawyers to handle these proceedings at no extra cost. In one paragraph, they outline Arthur's point of view. Now, I'm going to skip ahead because he's just outlining some of the law for contempt, and I don't want to get bogged down too much there because our focus here is the abusive nature of the judge, not when he just rolls out boilerplate language. So I'm down now on paragraph 18. When considering a fine, it is prudent that the judge imposing the sanction inquire about the contemner's ability to pay. So I'm on paragraph 18. This inquiry was made of the PAWLOWSKIs through their counsel. Taking the evidence at the sanction hearing in its entirety, it appears clear that both PAWLOWSKIs have resources to pay a significant fine if it's ordered. There is no evidence to that effect. They're pastors. They're not millionaires. This is the judge knowing that there are crowdfunding. In fact, this came up again and again. The government of Alberta said, Judge, you got to hit him hard because he has so many supporters, they'll just pay the fine through crowdfunding. Sorry to interrupt.
That's why AHS said that even though jail is not within any of the relevant cases, that's why Alberta Health Services said not only do these guys need jail, but they need 21 days and then some if we could get it, because of this ability to crowdfund, which means the fact that these people, the PAWLOWSKIs and Chris Scott, that people stand behind them. They took that as a knock against them in court.
Yeah.
And they played Rebel News coverage repeatedly, clips that weren't evidence in any way, shape, or form, but they were playing footage of me asking people to go to saveartur.com as though that's somehow evidence that he should be imprisoned or face steeper fines because Rebel News will pay them. And the judge said that himself. So, again, extremely troubling.
So the judge is sort of lying here about ability to pay. It's not that the PAWLOWSKIs have the ability to pay. It's that tens of thousands of people around the world are so outraged by this. So the judge is lying, which, again, you don't want a judge who lies. Let me keep going on. Paragraph 19, the relationship between costs and fines. I'll skip ahead. While modest fines can work for many breaches, they may not be appropriate in all cases. I'm going to skip ahead.
21 is crazy.
Okay, 21. The root of the problem is that these people challenge the authority of the courts in a public and community disruptive way and bring the administration of justice into disrespect. Nah, mate, I think you've handled that one.
Yep.
These breaches can be extremely challenging. No judge wants to imprison striking nurses or protesting priests, but as many judges have noticed, we don't get to pick and choose the orders we wish to obey and the ones we don't. If this was permitted in free and democratic society, we would quickly disintegrate into a society where the rule of law was ignored. Really? Where's the order against Jason Kenney and the disgraced former health minister Tyler Shandro, who were caught in flagrante delicto having their little rooftop party at the Sky Palace? And here's a judge saying, oh, no, we need rule of law. And I'm really sorry I've got to throw nurses and priests in jail. I mean, we just got to. I mean, I'm not going to throw the premier in jail. Yeah.
And actually, sorry, Ezra, to interrupt you, but the judge actually pointed that out when he was referring to Pastor Art's statement to the court. He said that basically he took offense to the fact that Pastor Art pointed out that the premier had broken the same order that Art could have gone to jail for and that Art is being held in contempt of. And he said to the judge, if you throw me in jail, then you should throw Jason Kenney in jail too. And the judge took great offense to Pastor Art pointing out the unequal application of this very court order.
And from the beginning, this has been about bending the knee. Like there tons of people, countless people have been violating these orders from all the way down, other religious denominations. But as Tyler Shandro said, they're going to target high-profile offenders. So it has been about going after people. The majority of people might agree with them. The majority of people might be getting together for Thanksgiving dinners anyways. But these are the people who are publicly stating it. And when Artur PAWLOWSKI, when he wouldn't bend the knee in court and he said, no, I'm sorry, but fundamentally, I'm not going to apologize for being a pastor, that struck a nerve. And that is why this politicized and ideological ruling is so dramatic. But unfortunately, they've showed their cards. Like, we have in print proof of how politicized the courts have become.
I'm sorry I've got a cold, everybody. I just want to apologize for the fact that I'm blowing my nose from time to time. I apologize for that. but I just wanted to join this broadcast. I apologize if I'm taking away from the gravity of the broadcast. I want to take you to paragraph 30. I think this is one of the worst paragraphs in the case. Let me read it to you now. When the Pawlowskis left the church, they were arrested in a spectacle mirroring arrests seen in mass protests or third world countries. Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah, exactly.
It is not.
Yeah.
And but listen how the judge continues. It is not an unreasonable observation that the Pawlowskis reveled in their arrest and went out of their way to make the arrest the Saturday night news spectacle it turned out to be. Hang on. How
Victim
can that
blaming.
be if they were in jail? Well, it's victim blaming. So the judge just said this was third world style policing.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think that's the only honest word in this
100%.
ruling.
Yeah, that's how they treat
they
people who
reveled in
protest
their
the government in third world countries. Yeah.
Exactly.
But let me ask you this, and I know because I was on the phone all weekend with various lawyers for Arthur. He was in jail for 3 days. They violated his right to make a phone call. They violated his the standard of being before a judge within 24 hours. They kept him in the maximum security facility for 3 days. He was incommunicado. That's third world style too. So from the moment he was arrested, in fact, Andrew, do you want to put up the B-roll of that SWAT team style arrest just to remind people what we're talking about? The police could have arrested Arthur Pawlowski at any time or place. They could have arrested him at his house or at the church. They could have called up his lawyer, Sarah Miller, and said, please have your client turn himself in. That's often how it's done when there's a lawyer on the other side. But instead, the police had this massive shock and awe arrest. Bizarrely, they pulled him in the middle of the road, cars whizzing by, made him kneel down on the street to humiliate him. And then he was taken away not to be heard from for 3 days. So how does this judge know that the Pawlowskis reveled in their arrest? I don't think they reveled in it. I think they were shocked and deeply disturbed by it. And what on earth does it mean? Went out of their way to make their arrest the Saturday night news spectacle it turned out to be. So Saturday night,
They were in jail.
he was in jail. So what was he doing in jail to make it a spectacle? What was he doing?
It's the absolutely shocking thing is the fact that I think they believe that they're so beyond reproach, like they're so ideologically shut off to the realities of the world, that when they see this arrest footage and then when they see the dramatic reaction, this was international news instantaneously, they believe that this was somehow orchestrated. They can't even grasp for a moment that the world agreed with Justice Germain and said, this is third world policing, this is thought control, and this is wrong. They don't understand that. They can't imagine that. They think there's manipulators behind the scenes turning this into a story. It is a story. It's one of the biggest stories of the year, and that's why people are so impassioned about it.
Well, but I just want to read that language one more time, because I think this shows not only that the judge is unmoored from reality, is saying things that clearly were not in evidence in any of the hearings, and he's engaging in projecting his own fevered dreams and his own fantasies and imaginations. He gets into mind reading later. We'll show you that in a moment. But they went out of their way to make their arrest the Saturday night news spectacle that it turned out to be. I just stop for a second. How did they go out of their way? How does the judge know this? On what information or evidence is he saying this? Was there any testimony or evidence in support of this? Did he ask the Pawlowskis this? Did he ask the Pawlowskis' lawyer this? Did Alberta Health Services have any information? Or was it every single reporter in the world who said, oh my God? So I'm just going to read that one more time. It is not an unreasonable observation that the Pawlowskis reveled in their arrest and went out of their way to make their arrest the Saturday night news spectacle that it turned out to be. You wicked liar, how the hell are you sitting in a court as a judge? So he says it's not an unreasonable observation, but no one actually made that observation because no one's that stupid or weird or just, he just fabricated it. Here's the next line. From this, okay, so he's established in his mind this weird, impossible fact. From solitary confinement, they were in solitary. Or they actually, I think they were maybe with one person. From solitary confinement, they orchestrated this international media round. You stupid man. From this, it can be seen that Pastor Artur Pawlowski's conduct and that of his brother was extremely aggravating. Really? His conduct was they were in jail.
Yeah.
They engaged in both direct and public defiance of a court order designed to save people's lives. Their sanction must be significant. You wicked, lying man, what are you doing as a judge? FireTheJudge.com. Go there, and we've got to get the Canadian Judicial Council to suspend this bizarre. Maybe he's losing his cognitive abilities. I think he's 74. Most people have still have their clear wits at 74. Maybe this judge is just damn well losing it. I don't think he read Artur Pawlowski's legal briefs, so I think he's being forgetful. I think he may be incompetent. And if that's the case, then I withdraw some of my personal criticism. If he's just easing his way into dementia, I apologize. And I would withdraw some of my attacks. But if it's the opposite, if he knows exactly what he's doing, and he's just a malicious bigot, either way, he should be removed from the bench. You can't have someone who's losing their cognitive ability on the bench. We don't have unlimited terms on the bench as they do in America. And in America, you can be a judge at age 100. In Canada, I think it's 75, just like in the Senate, you're out. And that may be a good idea. Let's keep going. Section 31. These individuals breached a court order issued in favor of a health authority designed to protect people by keeping them socially distant, away from groups, and wearing masks in public. While I respect that these are all intrusions on personal liberty, they are not sacrifices that would offend the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Yes, they are, you weirdo.
This has never been decided, by the way. This was not before him.
Well, that's right. And here's how it works under the Canadian Constitution. We have a series of freedoms, Section 2 of the Constitution, called Fundamental Freedoms. Adam, I don't know if you can find that. It's pretty easy to find. It's called the Charter of Rights, Section 2. Fundamental freedoms. Freedom of conscience, thought, belief, religion, speech, the press, assembly, freedom of association. It's my favorite part of the Charter. So does banning people from meeting violate the freedom of association and assembly? Of course it does. Does banning people from, that's just freedom of religion. But go back to the whole list of them. Just go to the list of, don't worry about it. Yeah, don't worry about it. So in Canada, there's a two-step process. It's called the Charter two-step. That's how we were taught it in law school. Step one is, did you violate the freedom? The answer is almost always yes. So then you go to Section 1 of the Constitution, which was it demonstrably justifiable in a free and democratic society? So I think a competent judge would say, of course, ordering people to wear something on their face, of course, banning people from meeting, of course, forcing people to distance is a violation of your civil liberties. Obviously it is. But it's saved under Section 1 of the Constitution that it's reasonably demonstrable in a free and democratic society. That's what a real judge would say. He would acknowledge that, of course, they offend the Charter. But they're saved by Section 1. I don't even think this... I'm starting to wonder if this judge is even of sound mind.
And I mean,
the restrictions were...
Could this potentially set... Like, this is now a court document. I think it's so vital that this is appealed because someone could then reference this sanction as stating all of this in court as evidence.
Yeah. I mean, look at this crackpot. One medical doctor recently compared the rule breakers as someone who might drive impaired. Often when they crash into innocent victims that suffer the injury. There's no evidence.
A TV doctor.
What? Yeah, so he's listening to a TV doctor make some soundbite. Yeah. This judge didn't read the damn filings in front of him. He's either lazy or incompetent or forgot, but he's quoting TV doctors. That's this judge.
Yeah.
Yeah, deeply embarrassing. Sheila, do you want to read?
A drunk driver wouldn't receive 18 months probation like Pastor Artur Pawlowski did.
That's a great
also
point.
True.
Unbelievable.
Do you want me to pick up, Ezra?
Yeah, why don't you pick up from, I think Section 33 is one of the most egregious. Why don't you take Section 33, Sheila?
Sure. Section 33. When Pastor Pawlowski addressed the court, he taunted me
Actually, you know what,
to
Sheila?
imprison him.
I apologize. Sheila, go back to Section 32. We skipped over it. It's absolute madness. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, please. Pastor Artur Pawlowski has few mitigating circumstances. Although his legal counsel has marshaled all that she can to assist her clients, the submissions cannot ameliorate the severity of the breach of the Rook Order. The religious overtone to the service being conducted by Pastor Pawlowski on May 8th, well, it was a church service, so that'll happen. The fact that he had little or no notice and therefore had little time to apply sober second thought to his conduct, that's also true. He literally had no notice to mitigate the breach of the court order. And the fact that he is entitled to free speech and to express in a democratic country his beliefs are not, in my view, mitigating circumstances. That's insane. That's insane.
Yeah, that's madness.
Yeah, you know what? And the implication that it's not a real service, it's not a real church service, it was a political rally. Look at Section 33. When Pastor Pawlowski addressed the court, he taunted me to imprison him. You wicked liar. He did not do that. And we know that because we have the ruling. Now, you thin-skinned weirdo may have felt like it was a taunt. But here's a man who you were about to jail or censor, and you say, he taunted me. He knows that for him, the 21 days in jail would be a slap on the wrist that will make him a martyr? Oh, really? So he wants you to put him in prison. Is that right? Just like he wanted the police to arrest him SWAT team style? Just like he orchestrated a media storm when he was in solitary confinement? What a weird fabulist. He's just making things up. He's a mind reader.
Sorry, Ezra, before we finish, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but we just skipped over one of the craziest things that was, again, not in evidence before the court. This is the judge just making things up out of thin air because this evidence was never presented. I did not miss a single court hearing. At the last sentence of Section 32, the police, for officer safety reasons, had to stand down until the Pawlowski brothers left the building where they held their services and meetings. So this is how he's justifying the SWAT-style takedown of the Pawlowskis on a rain-soaked street, that they had to stand down for safety reasons. There have never been any safety threats against those officers anytime they're ever at church. Never. Not once. And that was never in evidence before the court.
That is a great point. It's laughable. Pastor Artur Pawlowski is noisy. He calls people Gestapo if they invade his church during a service. And he's stubborn. But all of those things are peaceful. He's never been charged with a crime in his life. And this judge says, with no factual underpinning, no evidence whatsoever, that the police were afraid of him for safety reasons. What a wicked liar. What a fabulous, but maybe some TV pundit told him that because he's quoting TV doctors. This judge, I'm serious. I think this judge is just malicious, an anti-Christian bigot, and he's clearly living in terror of COVID-19. Clearly, he's had a death in the family or something. When he says every single Albertan knows at least one person who dies, that's likely impossible, given that 1 in 1,500 people. I think this judge is living in a fantasy land. He's got to be taken off the bench before he ruins more people's lives.
And his characterization of Pastor Artur Pawlowski, I honestly think these people think that Artur Pawlowski has been feeding homeless people twice a week on the streets of Calgary for 16 years as a part of a massive publicity ploy that 16 years later, the government would clamp down on him and he'd become an international superstar. Like, they're acting as though all of this work that he does, the people who are recovered addicts that I've talked to, the people who are part of this church and have found community, and the homeless community that absolutely loves this man because he is the one feeding them, they honestly believe that that's all a facade and part of this adventure seeking for publicity. It's absolute madness, and it's if you actually believe that, you certainly have no position making judicial rulings on other people.
Yeah, let me back up from paragraph 33. This has nothing to do with the law. This has nothing to do with the evidence before the court. This has everything to do with a malicious vendetta by an aging liberal who doesn't understand why the public didn't vote for him when he ran for the Liberals, but the public seems to like this turbulent priest. Let me quote. After Pastor Artur Pawlowski was found guilty of contempt, he went on a speaking tour in the United States where he parlayed his title as a pastor and the fact that he had been arrested for holding a church service into a rally cry that attracted like-minded individuals in the United States who also opposed healthcare measures addressed at combating COVID-19. So this is what really bugs the judge. And first of all, I don't think that this judge actually heard any of the speeches that Pawlowski gave in the U.S. So how does he know what the rally cry was? I don't think this judge knows who the quote like-minded individuals are who also oppose healthcare measures. Really? Is that what they oppose? Do they really oppose healthcare measures, or do they oppose the government shutting down churches?
Well, and that sentence is extremely telling because it's letting us know that what his problem with is like-minded individuals. It's not just Pastor Artur Pawlowski. Pastor Artur Pawlowski has become the target that represents anyone who disagrees with not health measures, but overbearing health restrictions that violate our fundamental freedoms. He's using Pastor Artur Pawlowski bag for all of us.
I think this next sentence is the purest distillation of how this judge is simply out of control, does not understand his role, does not understand his mandate, does not understand the law. And remember, this is a failed liberal candidate. You got to keep this in mind. This person was appointed to the court as a patronage thank you by Jean Chrétien after he failed in political office. So he's a political failure who was given a thank you as a judgeship. That is not how people should be appointed as judges. Look at this. Paragraph 34. It is disappointing that Pastor Pawlowski had to air his grievances about Alberta in another country. Okay. So he can't. So the courts have an opinion about Artur Pawlowski and the fact that he has a grievance. They have an opinion, and they say this is not Adam Germain speaking as a liberal candidate. If this was a liberal candidate, Adam Germain, yeah, it's a fair political point of view. But this is a court of Queen's Bench representing the Queen. This is justice. This is a precedent. And if you complain about Alberta, the court's going to hold that against you. Leaders and statesmen don't do that. Really? That's all Justin Trudeau does, frankly. He trashes Canada. During his sanction hearing, Alberta Health Services played some trip reports in which Pastor Pawlowski oozes hubris. Hubris, that's a Greek word for pride. And the judge doesn't like that. The judge, this is so important to the judge that he gives it its own paragraph, his personality assessment of Artur Pawlowski. Does this have anything to do with the law? No, but Pastor Pawlowski oozes hubris while relishing in his notoriety. Really? Really? This is victim blaming. He loves being arrested. He loved the SWAT team takedown. That's hubris. He got it to take a picture with a governor of a U.S. state. He is proud of what he asserts is the love of the U.S. people for him. Love he implies he is not feeling in Canada. What is this doing in a court ruling? This judge is obsessed. Yeah. This judge has a personal vendetta. That's why this judge needs to be suspended. This judge cannot control his emotions. This is a Dear Diary entry from an emo high school girl. Dear Diary, the mean girls oozed hubris today. The mean girls embarrassed me by airing grievances. Yeah. Dear Diary, at school today, the other cheerleader said that she's more loved than me. Dear Diary, I hate him.
She got a picture with the class president.
Dear Diary, the last politician who spent any time with me was Jean Chrétien. Dear Diary. Section 35, he accuses the court of being a tool of the government. Well, it is a branch of the government. There's three branches of the government: the judiciary, that means the courts, the executive, that's cabinet, and the legislature. It is a branch of the government. What are you talking about?
Part of the ruling, sorry, Ezra, but part of the ruling is to make Pastor Art spout AHS factoids of the day. So, yeah, they are a tool of the government.
Well, yeah, an abusive, illegal tool. I mean, my God, you must say what the... I'm a judge. Through the power of the state and the threat of imprisonment, I'm ordering you to say whatever the government says about the pandemic. P.S. How dare you say I'm a tool of the government? You show no, I'm quoting from paragraph 35, you show no civic understanding of the independence of the courts and their distance from the government. Sure, I'm going to make you say exactly what they say, but how dare you, sir? You're oozing hubris again. You're reveling in your solitary confinement. His address to the court during his sanction hearing was a political condemnation of the current government, a condemnation of the men and women who make up AHS. So he's confirming a condemnation of the court and basically a condemnation of everyone who follows the science of COVID-19. Now, would that be the science that says don't wear a mask, that then turns to do wear a mask? The science that says take the Moderna shot, that then says don't take the Moderna shot? The science that says
mix your shot, don't mix your shot.
Yeah. I think we can continue on YouTube. I'm just wondering what the science of COVID-19 is. And simply, let me keep reading on section 35. He simply refuses to apologize, and his lawyer indicated that it would be hypocritical of him to do so in light of his disdain for AHS and the current Alberta government. Now, I'm a bit of a speller, and that's not how you spell disdain. I think that Justice Germain not only needed a spell checker, I think he needed someone to say, are you serious? You're going to publish? I think he needed a babysitter. I don't know, a nurse or something. Section 36, he again describes health authorities as Nazis. Oh, this is my favorite. Adam Germain is going to give a Polish pastor a lesson about Nazis. Section 36, he again describes health authorities as Nazis. Pastor Pawlowski makes much virtue of his status in Canada as an immigrant from Poland. How dare he? With this background, he should understand. I'm going to give him a lecture about Poland now, because I'm on a patronage appointment from Fort McMurray. I'm going to teach Pastor Pawlowski a little something about Poland. I've never been to Poland. I can't read Polish. I don't know Polish history. I'm a Jean Chrétien failed candidate, but I'm going to teach this Polish immigrant a little something about Poland. Okay, everybody listen up. I'm going to teach you a little lesson about Poland now. Dear Diary. With this background, he should understand how inappropriate it is to compare public health officials to a group that killed, by many accounts, 4 million Polish people, of which at least half were Jewish. It defies belief that any immigrant from Poland, having studied the atrocities of the Nazis in that country, could identify a doctor of medicine trying to keep people alive as a Nazi. You know what? I know a little bit. I'm not from Poland myself, but I'm a Jew, and I remember learning just a teeny tiny bit about the Holocaust. Maybe I don't. I've been to the Holocaust Museum at Yad Vashem in Israel probably 6 times. I used to lead trips there every year until the COVID stopped travel. I've been to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. I've probably read a dozen books on the Holocaust. I grew up, I went to a Jewish school. Our principal and our Yiddish teacher were Holocaust survivors. So I may not have the expertise of Adam Germain. But actually, one of the lessons of the Holocaust that came from Joseph Mengele was that you cannot conduct a medical procedure on someone without their consent. That's one of the lessons of the Holocaust. Now, I don't know as much about the Holocaust as Adam Germain does, because I'm not a liberal candidate who failed his way into a judgeship. So I don't know a lot about the Holocaust and Joseph Mengele. And Artur Pawlowski doesn't know a lot about Poland. But we should all sit back and take a lesson from this weirdo. Dear Diary. His address, on 36 again, his address to the court was so inflammatory that I must remind myself that his failure to apologize and to acknowledge his wrongdoings is not a sanctioned aggravation, but only a lack of mitigation. And again, there he says what he's not doing. He's obviously obsessed with this. If it's got nothing to do with it, why is he going on paragraph after? He oozed hubris. He oozed it. He was oozing hubris.
Can you imagine, we've talked about the double standard and then the uneven application. Can you imagine if Justice Germain had said, as a black man or as an Asian or as a Jew, you should understand? Imagine that. And yet he gets a free pass when he says, as a Polish immigrant, you don't really know anything. If he would have said that about any other group, it would have been deemed categorically racist, categorically inappropriate. But apparently you can take free shots at Polish immigrants in the Court of Queen's Bench here in Alberta and get a free pass.
Yeah, and you can tell them what the Holocaust was or wasn't about, because you know. Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's why we got to go to firethejudge.com. I'm sorry I'm blowing my nose. I apologize for that, people. I've got a bit of a cold. I just, please forgive me for that. Let's keep going here. Section 37. Sheila, do you want to read a bit?
Sure. Pastor Pawlowski is entitled to express his views about the government, the courts, and AHS, but he must do so in a respectful, hate-free way that does not breach AHS health orders. He was not arrested because of his religion. No.
I mean, is that a law? You have to respect the government? Do I have to respect Dina Hinshaw, who just went on national TV and lied and said a 14-year-old boy who died of brain cancer actually died of COVID? Do I have to respect her? Is that a rule now? Is that some law? I have freedom of thought, belief, conscience, and speech, except I must respect the government. I don't have to respect the government. I disrespect the government. And actually, that's my right. This judge is out of control and needs to be brought to heel.
They're trying to put those Facebook censorship bubbles on human beings. Like, as you're walking around, like you pop up on Twitter, they're trying to put that on people.
Yeah. Well, and he must do it in a respectful, hate-free way that does not breach AHS orders. But what if AHS orders limit everything that you can do, including the ability to protest? How do you protest the government when the government limits your ability to protest? Yeah.
What does it mean to be hate-free? I think it's pretty fair to say that Justice Adam Germain hates Artur Pawlowski. I mean,
100%.
I mean, the way he describes him, I mean, you could say that Artur Pawlowski oozes hubris, but this ruling oozes disrespect and disparagement and odium towards Artur Pawlowski. Does anyone think that Adam Germain doesn't hate Artur Pawlowski? Every sentence oozes hatred. This judge is not in control of his emotions. This judge is full of hate.
Yeah. He goes on to say that. Yeah, I was going to say he says that Pastor Art was not arrested because of his religion or his religious worship, which is weird because he was arrested because he didn't let people inspect his church during church services, or for his outlandish publicity-seeking views. Again, I don't think Pastor Art seeks publicity. The things that the government does to him draws publicity towards the government because people cannot believe what they are seeing. He says Pastor Art was arrested for breaching a court order.
Pardon me, I'm a little sick. I apologize. What is a publicity-seeking view? I know what a view is. It's an opinion. It's thinking. It's a philosophy. In his case, it's a religion. It's a faith. So I know that every weekend for decades he's gone out and fed the homeless. I don't think he puts out a press release. Publicity. I don't think a view is publicity seeking. I think publicity seeking is when you seek publicity. This judge. What is a publicity seeking view? That's a view that this judge doesn't think is legitimate.
Yeah.
This is purely a punishment for his view. Oh, he was seeking publicity when the police threw him in solitary confinement for 3 days. You publicity seeker. This judge has to go to firethejudge.com.
I think he's saying a popular view, like a view that takes grasp of the hearts of millions of people around the world, that those can't be allowed. That's a publicity seeking. It's a popular view because many people agree with it. And that's what Justice Adam Germain doesn't like, is that the AHS perspective and the government perspective is not popular, and Pastor Artur Pawlowski's perspective is.
Yeah.
He just can't believe that people think something differently than him about the pandemic. And he's so shocked. And that's what this whole thing is. It's a tirade that somebody thinks something different than him.
Let me read from paragraph 37. During his court statement, he pointed out that the premier of the province, in the middle of the pandemic, was observed dining with a group of other politicians and appearing not to obey the Alberta health orders. This gave him an opportunity to suggest that I should jail the premier along with him, and they could share the same cell. Again, I view this as part of Pastor Pawlowski's fervent desire that I martyr him by giving him a little more jail time to add a little more gasoline to the anti-mask, anti-vaccination fire. What a stupid man. That's not the point he was making. The point he was making is how the law is not being implemented evenly. That's not Artur Pawlowski saying, put me in jail, please, please, please. That's Artur Pawlowski saying, how dare you put me in jail if the premier's not in jail with me?
That's exactly what he did say.
Did the judge literally interpret that as, please put me in a jail cell with Jason Kenney so we can broadcast? Like, that was clearly not the point he was making.
And either this judge is just so hate-fueled and that he sees red, he can't think straight, or he's losing his cognitive powers. Section 38, Pastor Artur Pawlowski and his brother David Pawlowski and others that I dealt with in this sanction hearings are on the wrong side of science, history, and common sense on this issue. Oh, is that what the law is about? And you know what? Can I go back a few centuries? Galilei is on the wrong side of history. Galileo is on the wrong side of science, history, and common sense. And I believe, they quote some more, the growing number of dead and dying in North America cannot be ignored or defined as a false reality. Pastor Pawlowski's outspoken sermon and political lecture delivered to me in this sanction hearing was a cry for jail? Because Pastor Pawlowski has observed that jail will add to his persona as a martyred Christian fighting the forces of government evil? Holy crap, is this a conspiracy theorist? This judge is nuts. This judge is creating fantasies. Artur Pawlowski does not want to go to jail. When he said Kenny should be in jail with me, that's not saying put me in jail. That's saying, how can you put me in jail if he's not? This judge is abominable.
And the wild thing is, mere paragraphs ago, he's saying that Pastor Artur Pawlowski clearly doesn't understand what happened in Nazi Germany. And herein, he's saying, well, this is disagreement with the government, the consensus on the science. If the science of Nazi Germany couldn't have been more wrong on a number of issues, he's referencing that mere paragraphs ago and then saying that you have to absolutely submit and comply with state science because it's common sense.
Look at paragraph 40 again. No evidence whatsoever. Pastor Pawlowski's activism against the COVID-19 health measures gave him two significant personal benefits. First, the ability to raise money. Second, the thing he cherishes the most, public notoriety. To a lesser extent, this is what his brother David wishes as well. That's a lie. Artur Pawlowski has not raised money. He has not received a cent. I know this because I set up the crowdfunding page called SaveArthur.com. And I know that SaveArthur.com, not 1 cent goes to the Pawlowskis personally at all. It only goes to his legal bills. It cannot go to Arthur. It is only for civil liberties litigation.
It doesn't even go to us. It doesn't even go to Rebel News. It goes to a registered Canadian charity called the Democracy Fund that works to advance civil liberties. None of this goes to us or Art.
And I think what this boils down to is the fact that maybe Justice Germain is used to bullying the little guys. And suddenly we have a brilliant lawyer like Sarah Miller and a top-notch legal team standing up on Artur Pawlowski's behalf, saying enough is enough. And ultimately what's happening here is Justice Adam Germain does not like the little guys punching up and standing up for themselves.
This is so weird. I mean, it's a wicked lie that Artur Pawlowski has benefited from this through money. I know that because the only payments have gone to Sarah Miller, the lawyer. That's it. Mm-hmm. There's no payments to her. I just know that. So that's a wicked lie. No evidence to support it. The second thing, public notoriety. But the only evidence of that is because the police keep harassing him, and that's the spectacle. And because he dares to speak back. This judge just made it up. This is an out-of-control judge. FireTheJudge.com, people. If you haven't signed up, go there right now. I'm gonna scroll down here a little bit. We've spent an hour on this so far.
While you're looking through that, if you're finding the next spot, I just want to encourage people, whether you like Pastor Artur Pawlowski or not, Pastor Artur is more than well aware that he's not for everyone. But I'm asking you to shrug aside your biases. Don't do the Adam Justice Germain and have your blinders on. Look through this document for yourself. If you're a lawyer, if you're a journalist, whoever you are, look through this document for yourself and consider the content inside. This is a story that must be brought to attention and must be reported on. FireTheJudge.com. Find this document and just read it for yourselves.
So, thank you. Paragraph 43. He says that the Alberta government wanted lots of jail time for the brothers. But look at what he says. I've decided that further jail time is inappropriate as there is more effective ways in which they can make reparations for the breach of the order. On balance, I suspect that many reasonable individuals will view the sanctions that I impose to be more beneficial in repairing the harm Pastor Pawlowski and his brother did to society than a short period of jail. Well, perhaps that will perhaps martyr them in the eyes of their followers. Hang on. So this isn't so you are reforming their politics. Look at this. Paragraph 44. I therefore intend to handle this without additional jail time, but instead impose a very large fine, community service work, plus a requirement. This is the insane part. That whenever they are opposing the Alberta health orders in any public forum, including social media forums, they must also place the other side of the argument on the record. So this obviously applies to his sermons at church.
Yeah.
The sanctioning of a contemptor, that's someone who's in contempt of court, is an individualized process. Here I've emphasized the importance of deterrence with a large fine. The Ontario cases, which I said earlier, are not binding on me. However, I recognize that fines for those individuals received are less than the fine I'm imposing on Artur Pawlowski and David Pawlowski. This is purposeful, as a large fine was the only option preventing a period of imprisonment. He's lying. He didn't even read the case law. He's a lazy judge.
No.
But here, paragraph 46 is the worst. Pastor Artur Pawlowski is sentenced to 3 days in jail. He's already served. $23,000 fine, 18 months probation, the term and condition of which will be to keep the peace, be of good behavior, obey all rules, provide 120 hours of community service, working at a homeless shelter, a food bank, or any facility in charity, but excluding the street church. Why is that? Why excluding his own church? And he works with the homeless every day. Like, seriously, why? Like, it's a laugh that this judge, this elite 1%er, who has never, I would be willing to bet that Adam Germain has never spent 1 hour feeding the homeless. So I'm looking at homeless shelter, food bank, or any other facility in charity, excluding the street church ministry. So all Artur Pawlowski does is help the homeless.
And
I don't think Germain spent...
Sorry to jump in, but Pastor Art feeds the people who cannot go to a homeless shelter or a food bank because of their behavior, because of their hygiene, because of their addictions, because of their mental illness. They're the people who they've been asked not to go to those places. So these are the people, like the most destitute in Calgary. That's who Pastor Art works with, and that is who Justice Adam Germain says Pastor Art cannot help as a condition of his sentence. And so if you take Pastor Art away from those people, so he has to do 120 hours somewhere else, who helps those people? Who helps them now?
The wildest thing outside of the court, the immediate response when Pastor Artur Pawlowski relayed his sentencing to everybody, when he said, and there's probably 50 to 100 people outside the court protesting this, no media there, even though City TV was right there, but when Pastor Artur Pawlowski said I was sentenced to 120 hours of community service, in unison, without hesitation, the entire crowd erupted into laughter, because that is 5 days for Pastor Artur Pawlowski. That's all he does.
No kidding.
At once they erupted into laughter at that.
This is one of the worst judges in Canada. This is one of the worst judges I've ever seen. This judge does not have a respect for the administration of justice, for the rule of law. This judge does not bind himself by precedent. This judge does not control his emotions. This judge does not do his homework. He does not look at precedent. He does not look at court submissions. This judge is punitive. This judge has a thin skin. This judge is emotional. This judge is vengeful. This judge has no place serving on the Court of Queen's Bench. This judge should be suspended while the Canadian Judicial Council reviews him, and they should terminate him. And let me get to more reasons why. Let me read section 46, sub 4. You saw how the judge hated the fact that Artur Pawlowski went on a speaking tour. What's that got to do with this case? You saw how the judge hated the fact that he got a photo taken with the governor. What on earth does that have to do with this case? So this judge is going to make sure that doesn't happen again. Look at this. He must remain in the province of Alberta during the period of probation unless he obtains the consent of his probation officer, who will authorize such temporary absences if they are for an emergency, family, or health matter. If he is not currently in the province of Alberta, he must return within 7 days and report in person to Alberta. So he can't go on any speaking tours, and no more selfies with governors. This petty, vengeful judge will see to that. He can't get this loser, failed politician can't get meetings with governors, so then neither can Arthur. Here's the worst part in the whole ruling. We've been talking for an hour, and if you're still with us, this is the absolute worst part of the ruling. This is something you would see in North Korea. This is something you would see in Iran. This is something you would see in communist Soviet Russia. The final term of his probation order will be that when he is exercising his right of free speech and speaking against Alberta health orders and Alberta health recommendations, so not even an order, but just a recommendation. Hey, guys, here's a suggestion. In a public gathering or public forming, including electronic social media. And obviously this applies to
this includes church.
His church. He must indicate in his communications the following. And it's written in the first person, so he's got to read this lengthy self-denunciation. This is a pure struggle session like in Maoist China. Let me read. I am also aware that the views I am expressing to you on this occasion may not be views held by the majority of medical experts in Alberta. While I may disagree with them, I am obliged to inform you that the majority of medical experts favor social distancing, mask wearing, and avoiding large crowds to reduce the spread of COVID-19. Most medical experts also support participation in a vaccination program, unless for a valid religious or medical reason you cannot be vaccinated. Vaccinations have been shown statistically to save lives and to reduce the severity of COVID-19 symptoms. That's written in the first person. There's no amendment. Mm-hmm. There's no, by the way, look at that, the majority of medical experts. So he has to, here's the crazy thing. There is no one alive who hasn't been living in a cave or a coma for the last 2 years, who doesn't know the mainstream point of view. Now, quite a few of us will acknowledge and notice that the mainstream point of view changes when it's politically opportune to the politician in question. We learned from Scott Gottlieb, the former FDA commissioner, that the whole 6 feet of separation thing was just made up. No one knows where it came from. There was no study. Mm-hmm. Scott Gottlieb of the FDA said that. But no, Adam GERMAIN knows that's a fact. And Artur Pawlowski is not even allowed to say he's skeptical of Alberta Health Service suggestions without self-denouncing. And it's the same for his brother, David. And that takes us to the end. I'll just read, section 48, all the costs that they're forcing him to pay, interest, like he goes on for page after page about how much money. The debt will be subject to an interest charge of 3% to secure this debt. They'll issue a charge against anything in Arthur's name, including the church if he owns the building. The government will be able to collect the debt. They have 36 months to pay. If not, they'll sell the church. And then I'm on section 53. I recognize that it's not possible in a judgment such as this to cover all of the eventualities that may occur, including whether a default on payment of the fine should result in a period of imprisonment and for how long. Accordingly, I direct that in the event that any disagreement about the enforcement of any term of this ruling or any application for an amendment or variance should be brought back to me, as long as I am still a sitting member of the Court of Queen's Bench. If I am unable to act in any review capacity, counsel may approach Justice Rook, and he's the one who
issued this order.
Yeah, so he's not letting any other judge. He's not letting any other judge alter this. This bigoted bully says, no, you can't go to any other judge. And
that Justice Rook is the one. Sorry, Justice Rook is the one that issued these orders ex parte, who didn't think that it would be fit to involve the lawyers for the respondents in any of this.
Let me read section 54. Dear diary, as this brings an end, or at least a plateau, to these contempt proceedings against Pastor Artur Pawlowski and David Pawlowski, I would like to conclude by again thanking counsel for AHS and Pawlowski brothers for their professional courteous and responsible handling of this matter. Justice Adam Germain of the Court of Queen's Bench. Sarah Miller did a great job, but as they say in that movie, the remake of True Grit, I don't need a good lawyer, I need a good judge. And in this case, we have the worst judge in Canada. Justice Adam Germain cannot sit on the bench. He is bringing the administration of justice into disrepute. He has made up factually false things or things that were simply not in evidence. He oozes hatred for Artur Pawlowski and indeed Christians. He disparages them. He's motivated by inappropriate and irrelevant considerations. He's clearly jealous as a failed politician. He never had the widespread, let alone international support of Artur Pawlowski. One of the best men in Canada was just condemned by one of the worst men in Canada. And we have to do something about that. So please go to firethejudge.com. And I'm just checking right now. We have 1,069 signatures already. Our goal is 10,000 signatures. We'll present that to the Canadian Judicial Council. That's a group of senior lawyers who regulate other lawyers. Senior judges who regulate other judges. This is the most disgraceful ruling I think I've ever read in my life. Sheila, any final thoughts from you?
I mean, it's astounding, and I think we need to get the transcripts, too, because reading this ruling, I know that there are portions of this that when it was being read by the judge, he did ad-lib other parts where he said that Street Church was not really a legitimate church. He said it was Pastor Pawlowski's alter ego. And that's why he was levying fines directly against Pastor Art. So there's more to come. If you think this is outrageous, the transcripts are equally as bad, if not more, and shows just how petty this judge is and how unfit he is to sit in judgment of my fellow Albertans.
Yeah. Adam Soos, you were on the ground there with the man himself. And I'm really glad you told me about the fact that when that part of the crowd there for Artur Pawlowski were the homeless, were the people that he helps every day. And this Adam Germain, you have to do 10 hours a week of helping the homeless. Yeah, I do 10 hours a day, mate. I do 10 hours a day.
You know,
what do you think?
These if there was ever any doubt, I think Albertans conservatives have suspected for a while, at least with Justice Germain, Justice Rook, some of these other people, that there is a politicization perhaps for these individuals, particularly on these matters, there is political enforcement, not judicial enforcement. Justice Germain is so emboldened in this document that he has set that out in dried ink for us to such an extent that we now have the evidence right before us. The courts have become categorically politicized, and alongside the politicians, they are targeting people who dare ask questions. It's right here for us to see. It's time for the world to wake up. And one of the great sort of triumphs of this is that they keep trying to pile dirt on top of Pastor Artur Pawlowski. And every time they throw more dirt on, he just steps a little bit higher. And they've created such a mountain of dirt that the whole world can see it Pastor Artur Pawlowski, calling out their hypocrisy and their targeted discrimination of Christians here in Alberta.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'd like to apologize again. I'm sick at home today. I'm too sick to go to work, but and so please forgive me that I'm obviously sick and whatnot. But I just thought this was the most important news we've had in a while, and I would like to call on all the viewers to sign a petition at firethejudge.com and spread the word about it to help chip in to pay for Artur Pawlowski's legal appeal. And the judge is lying when he said he's profited. I know for a fact that the money doesn't go to Artur Pawlowski. I know for a fact because the bills are from Sarah Miller to the Democracy Fund, and that is the only bill that's paid. Under the law, under the Income Tax Act, the money can only be paid for the charitable purposes of the Democracy Fund. This judge lied. And he lied without any factual basis to justify his insane compelled speech rule. This judge lied when he said Artur Pawlowski profited. This judge lied when he said Artur Pawlowski is reveling in his arrest and orchestrated Saturday night coverage. He was in prison. I think, Adam, that you should go to church tomorrow. I presume that Artur Pawlowski is holding church tomorrow. He has a custom of holding it on Saturdays. And I would like you to watch what happens, because I think that it is quite possible that Artur Pawlowski gives a sermon and refuses to read what this judge has ordered him to say. And I think it's quite possible that Calgary's abusive police force immediately arrest him and take him to prison again. I think that's a real possibility. I would like you to be there if you would. And if you're actually, I understand that you have another obligation this weekend. I'm sorry. Perhaps Kean Simone of our
Rebel
Calgary
News
team in Sydney. Yeah, Rebel, thank you. I'm sorry. I forgot that you already have a commitment tomorrow. I think we need to be there because this is an appalling ruling that we're going to appeal, but it's also a trap. Because when you say to a principled man, you must denounce yourself or you go to prison, you know he's going to prison.
That was the first thing that Pastor Artur Pawlowski said to me after the ruling. He was upset visibly, and he said, "I'm going to jail." That was the first thing he said to me after the ruling.
Yeah. And this judge will probably say, "Oh, he wanted to." No, you wicked man. He just didn't want to read the government's self-renunciation. You know, the last time this was in vogue was in the Cultural Revolution in Mao's China, where people were forced to self-denounce and have hats and signs around their neck denouncing themselves for being enemies of the state. And they were forced to say what the government told them to say. Whether or not they agreed, it was on pain of physical torture or even death. Yeah, and this guy's telling Artur Pawlowski what the Nazis were and weren't like. We have to do something about this, my friends. We have to do something. And the best idea I have right now is firethejudge.com, and we'll send that to the Canadian Judicial Council. Sheila, Adam, thanks very much for the last 80 minutes. Once again, I apologize for my nose blowing. I'm so sorry about that, but I wanted to come on the broadcast. And thank you, everybody. Last word to you, Sheila.
I just want to let everybody at home know that no matter what, we are going to stand beside Pastor Art the whole way through SaveArtur.com, and none of it would be possible without the support of our viewers at home, because I think Pastor Art is going to move quickly into becoming a prisoner of conscience and a political prisoner of the Alberta government when he very likely declines to self-flagellate, according to Justice Adam GERMAIN.
Yeah. All right. Well, I hear from Andrew, our producer, that we have a video interview with Sarah Miller, the excellent lawyer who was in court for Artur Pawlowski. And I think that's a good way to end. So I'll say goodbye to Sheila and Adam now, and I'll wave goodbye. And Andrew, through you, please go ahead and run that video of an interview with Sarah Miller that Adam conducted a couple of days ago. I think it was just yesterday, actually. Thanks, everybody. Go to firethejudge.com, and until next time, keep fighting for freedom.
In this case, it certainly seemed over the top. The issues that he raised with Artur Pawlowski are not related to the contempt, right? He's really conflating two issues. On the one hand, you've got the issue of, is Artur Pawlowski contemptuous of Alberta Health Services, the public health orders? Has he been disregarding those? And there has been, some public discourse on that, right? It gets into the news. He, goes out on Facebook. It was in evidence in this proceeding that he does stand before his congregation and expresses doubts about the orders and the community effects that are caused by those orders. Isolation orders that tell us to stay home, not to gather in groups outside of our own household. Those are concerning to Artur, and he expresses his concerns about those. That's not contempt of court, right? I mean, you can disagree or agree with Artur Pawlowski as much as you want and feel really strongly on one side of the spectrum or the other, but that's not contempt of court.
Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
Adam Soos here for Rebel News, and we just left the courthouse where Pastor Artur Pawlowski heard his ruling on the sanction and understands the consequences ahead of him. But we will appeal those rulings. We will appeal the sanctions that he's facing. And in a moment, I'm going to be joined by Sarah Miller, who's going to talk about the ruling and serving as a legal defense for Pastor Artur Pawlowski on behalf of JSS barristers as part of our Fight the Fines campaign and through SaveArtur.com. Ultimately, this is really a victory on one hand in court, kind of a bizarre ruling, but we do have a victory in that, as you said, jail is not called for, imprisonment is not called for a first-time offender on contempt of court. Could you talk about at least the victory on that side and the fact that Pastor Artur will not be sent to prison?
Today, I really thought going into this morning that Artur Pawlowski and David Pawlowski would be sentenced to jail. That's obviously what Alberta Health Services was seeking. I didn't think that because it would be fair or right or just or reasonable, but because this is so much of a political argument being held in the courts as much as it is an issue as to whether or not the Pawlowskis were in contempt. No case that AHS was able to cite, no case that I was able to find supported a decision to send these two individuals to jail. Mm-hmm. Their contempt, if you accept the findings of the contempt, amounts to about 2 hours of an order that could have been clearer. Mm-hmm. To imprison these individuals after church was over, after any public health risk, supposedly expected by CPS was over, to imprison them at first instance was wrong. To order further imprisonment would have been wrong. So in that case, absolutely, this was a huge win. That Justice Germain decided not to imprison these two.
And before we get into the actual sanctions that were imposed, you're a lawyer, you may be able to shed more light on this. The nature of Justice Germain's remarks, not only bringing up cases that haven't been cited and talking about new matters, but from an outside bystander, it seemed like a personal attack on Artur Pawlowski from someone who was just listening in. There were a number of comments about his character, comparing him to drunk drivers, endangering people. Was this fairly characteristic, or was this truly an abnormal sort of occurrence within the court?
Well, Justice Germain started off with contempt is pretty regular. It happens all the time. Usually those are, as he noted, related to litigants who refuse to follow the rules of court, refuse to follow direction from the court, and have ample opportunity to do so, and have engaged in some litigation at some level. My ordinary clients would not be in contempt of court. We get an order, we ensure that they follow it. There's a rule to produce records, those are produced, right? I'm not saying it could never happen, but it certainly doesn't in my ordinary practice. So it's hard to know from an oral, delivery of a decision what is over the line in any certain way. But in this case, it certainly seemed over the top. The issues that he raised with Artur Pawlowski are not related to the contempt, right? He's really conflating two issues. On the one hand, you've got the issue of, is Artur Pawlowski contemptuous of Alberta Health Services, the public health orders? Has he been disregarding those? And there has been, some public discourse on that, right? It gets into the news. He, goes out on Facebook. It was in evidence in this proceeding that he does stand before his congregation and expresses doubts about the orders and the community effects that are caused by those orders. Isolation orders that tell us to stay home, not to gather in groups outside of our own household. Those are concerning to Artur, and he expresses his concerns about those. That's not contempt of court, right? I mean, you can disagree or agree with Artur Pawlowski as much as you want and feel really strongly on one side of the spectrum or the other, but that's not contempt of court. Contempt of court is once you have that order served, the Rook order served and brought to Artur's attention, then what did he do thereafter? And he continued to host church services for, maybe an hour-ish. Yeah. That is the contempt of court. And that really has nothing to do with whether or not COVID is real or whether or not public health orders are good. It just has to do with, what Artur was feeling towards that order, right? And for Justice Germain to go on at the beginning there about COVID is real, deaths are real, ICU numbers are real. We're not there to dispute any of that. That's not the purpose of this proceeding, and we've been really clear from the beginning that's not what we're arguing in this case. In this case, the question is, does Justice Rook's order apply to the Pawlowskis, and what should happen if it does?
So, and I think the sentiment that we've heard and from anyone participating in court is that there was a lot of sort of extrajudicial commentary provided that clearly reinforces the idea that there is a political element to this, that this isn't just about the matters in court. And it is as if that wasn't self-evident enough. The problematic ruling or the troubling ruling on the actual sanctions that we heard at the end, I'll allow you to notify them, but particularly they seek to stifle or at least add an appendix or an amendment to any public comment Pastor Artur Pawlowski makes. So I guess first, if you could let us know what Justice Germain assigned as sanctions to Pastor Artur Pawlowski and his brother.
So the sanctions were significant fines, far more than, say, what the churches faced in Ontario. Also significant costs, right? So those are the two financial aspects. We have significant fines, significant costs. Artur Pawlowski facing $20,000 on the contempt of Rook's order, and David facing $10,000 on the contempt of the Rook order. Then we have legal costs that they're going to share in excess of $15,000. Then we have probation. So Artur Pawlowski now, as soon as the order is made, under 18 months probation to keep the peace and be in good behavior, pretty common. Comply with public health orders. Then we have 120 hours of community service. Then we have the condition that he must stay in Alberta, and if he needs to leave Alberta, it's only under certain conditions that he's permitted to do so, and only with permission of his probation officer, which is a significant impact on his liberty. Then we have the compelled speech or the suppression of freedom of expression condition, which, and I don't have the words because we obviously, just have an oral decision and I can't write nearly as fast as most people can speak, but something along the lines of every time he expresses some sort of contrary view to what's out there in mainstream, AHS-oriented media, he has to say something along the lines of, but just so you know, the majority thinks something else. Right. And I was talking to somebody earlier today who's pointed out, but we all know what the majority point of view is. Mm-hmm. You'd have to be living under a rock at this point not to know that public health orders and AHS's, requirement and requests for vaccines and that whole push exists. We know that. We know that discourse exists, and it doesn't need to be caveated onto everything that's contrary to that. So that will be really interesting to see, how Justice Germain anticipates that to be enforceable, how he anticipates that to happen, I'm talking out on 8th Avenue, like now do I have to say it? If I'm talking on social media, do I have to say it? Is it only written? He made it sound like it's quite expansive. Like every time Artur opens his mouth, he's got to caveat it with, but the majority out there thinks something else. So that is really a bizarre condition to put on somebody, to compel certain speech, to suppress certain expression. It's certainly going to be, an aspect of our consideration with appeal.
And one of the comments that Justice Germain mentioned was that there's generally with Pastor Artur's comments, sort of I don't know if he used the term, but a war or an attack on Alberta Health Services or the government. This is how Justice Germain characterized it. But based on the ruling, it would seem to be the other way around. He's not allowed to leave the province, so he's not allowed to go on an American speaking tour, for example. That seemed to many, at least, mostly directed towards preventing him from touring and speaking and sharing his story. And then to take it a step further, literally implementing on a human being that he has to go around sort of with a disclaimer around his neck saying anytime he expresses an opinion as a pastor, which is expressing his opinion and sharing his beliefs is fundamental to his being, it's fundamental to his religious freedoms, he now has to add this sort of stipulation or add this amendment afterwards. Is there any precedent for someone being told anytime they have to make a comment or anytime they want to make a comment publicly, they have to follow it up with a preface?
There are some cases regarding compelled speech, like what you can compel out of somebody and whether that's, infringing on our Section 2 rights. I'm not familiar with any no, I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I'm not familiar with any precedent as to being able to make that kind of condition during a sentencing or a sanction. So it seems wholly, inspired by Artur's trip over the summer to the United States and the evidence put before the court on his speaking tour and how that inspired some people to support him. I think that Justice Germain was trying to find a way to suppress Artur Pawlowski as much as possible while trying to find a way to stay within the confines of precedential law. It remains to be seen, I guess. We'll see what the Court of Appeal has to say about whether or not he was successful at doing so.
Certainly. And we do plan definitely to appeal this ruling. Pastor Artur Pawlowski is not one to easily be silenced, and we certainly will have his back through our SaveArtur.com campaign. Obviously, this is just developing as we come along, but what does the appeals process look like? Will there be a stay so that he's not limited in his freedoms until that appeal is reviewed, or how does the process work? What does it look like in practice for Pastor Artur?
So once we file our appeal, we'll also file an application to stay the order pending the appeal. It's uncertain whether or not that will be granted. I would hope that it would be, considering the significant amount of fines and costs that have been awarded and the significant impact on his liberty and Section 7 rights, liberty and Section 6, I suppose, for being able to leave Alberta, but also his Section 2 rights on freedom of expression. So I would hope that that's all suspended on the basis of the appeal and can be picked up at a later date once we have a decision on the appeal, but it's yet to be determined.
Sarah, we want to thank you so much for your hard work for Artur on behalf of JSS Barristers and through our SaveArtur.com initiative. We're going to continue to fight, and once you've had a chance to review the written ruling and have the details and we have an idea for the appeal, we'll get back together and we'll do another recap. Again, thank you so very much. And for everyone watching, now is a vital time to help this legal battle. We did have a victory in court today. Pastor Artur is not going to jail, but it is abundantly clear that he has legal battles ahead of him. And if you want to help him in those legal battles, please go to SaveArtur.com. It's more vital than ever. As always, I want to thank you all for tuning into this important story. For Rebel News, I'm Adam Soos. It is absolutely vital, more vital than ever, that you go to SaveArtur.com and help us in the defense of Pastor Artur Pawlowski. An arduous appeals process lays ahead, and we are counting on your help to ensure that we can be successful.